At dawn, the Anatolian plateau lies quiet, wrapped in a silence older than memory. The wind moves lightly across the stones, whispering over hills that have watched the rise and fall of ages. Here in this stillness, the world feels untouched, a place suspended between night and morning, between the known and the forgotten, and somewhere beneath this pale light, beneath layers of earth and time, the first stories ever carved by human hands are waiting. This landscape, sparse and gentle, was once the gathering place for communities who lived before farming, before writing, before cities, before recorded civilization existed. Yet even then, they felt something calling. They felt the need to build, not shelters, not homes, but monuments, circles of stone rising from bare ground. Arrangements so deliberate, so precise, so meaningful, that they speak a language older than every alphabet that followed. For a long time, the modern world believed that religion came after farming, that people built temples only once they settled down. But here on this remote plateau, a very different truth was waiting. The first temple came before the first village. Worship shaped settlement, not the other way around. People did not gather because they built homes. They built homes because they gathered. They gathered because they believed. They believed in something vast, something unseen, something powerful enough to make nomadic hunters stay in one place long enough to carve their faith into stone. And so here, on the gentle rise of Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest known sanctuaries began to take shape. Not for shelter, not for survival, but for meaning, for myth, for the first architecture of belief, the first architecture of longing, the first architecture of faith. The stones of Göbekli Tepe do not merely stand, they remember. Each T-shaped pillar, each carved animal, each smooth surface worn by wind and time, holds the imprint of the earliest spiritual thought our species ever dared to express. They rise from the ground like frozen silhouettes of ancient guardians, tall, narrow, purposeful. Some stand in circles, others in pairs. Their arrangement is not random. Nothing here is. When sunlight touches these pillars, it glows along carved edges. Foxes, snakes, lions, boars, birds, images shaped by hands that knew the natural world with a kind of intimacy we've lost. These beings were not decorations. They were meanings, symbols, messengers. The people who carved them did not yet have farms or pottery, but they had myth. They had stories powerful enough to demand a sanctuary. Göbekli Tepe's builders carried heavy stone pillars weighing up to 20 tons. They moved them without wheels, without beasts of burden, without metal tools, just determination, community, and purpose. And it was purpose that turned stone into symbol, purpose that carved order from wilderness, purpose that made this hill a place where people gathered from miles around. Perhaps they came to celebrate the hunt, perhaps to mourn the dead, perhaps to listen for messages in the wind and fire. We do not know the rituals, but we know their intensity, because only intensity builds something meant to last 11,000 years. We can imagine them. Small groups approaching the hill long before sunrise, men and women moving together, carrying tools of stone and bone, their breath visible in the cold morning air, their footsteps pressing into soft earth. They did not think of themselves as builders of history or pioneers of civilization. They built because something inside them needed to create an anchor in a world of endless movement. They carved because carving made the invisible visible. They shaped pillars because pillars could hold meaning long after voices fell silent. Their tools were simple: hammerstones, flint scrapers, chisels of bone. Their planning was complex, a geometry of circles and alignments, each pillar positioned with intention. They cut limestone from the bedrock. They dragged pillars using ropes of hide. They raised them with teams of arms and will. And once the stones stood upright, they decorated them. Every carving an offering, every line of thought, every symbol a belief. We do not know their names, but their hands still echo through these carvings. Hands steady with purpose. Hands guided by memory and myth. Hands reaching across millennia to tell us, we were here, we believed, we created. And in that creation was the beginning of something vast. The enclosures of Göbekli Tepe are not random rings. They are circles of power, Each circle held a story, a ritual, a meaning. Two central pillars often stand taller than the rest, paired guardians facing one another as if in silent communication. Some archaeologists believe they represent mythic beings. Others think they represent the ancestors, or spirits, or the earliest concept of gods. The truth is simpler and deeper. They represent connection, the connection between people and myth, between earth and sky, between the living and the beyond. The circle, with its enclosed, embracing shape, was likely a place where communities gathered to remember stories older than speech. Fire would burn at the center, shadow and flame playing across carved stone. And as flames flickered, the beings on the pillars would seem to move, as if waking in the presence of those who carved them. These circles were not homes. They were sanctuaries of meaning, theaters of myth, places where belief became architecture, and every time one circle was finished, the builders buried it, intentionally, completely, not as abandonment, as completion, a ritual of closing, a gesture of respect. Göbekli Tepe was not one temple, it was many, each one built, used, then buried, like chapters of a story too sacred to leave exposed.